So we were told very early on that this, and I have abided by the opinion of the experts all along the way here. We've been told very early on that this was not in any way developed, this coronavirus was not developed in any way by a Chinese laboratory. Okay, now there's a piece by David Ignatius in the Washington Post talking about the possibility that, by the way, maybe this leaked from a Chinese laboratory. Whoops. David Ignatius, again, not me, David Ignatius, the Washington Post. He says, the story of how novel coronavirus emerged in Wuhan, China, has produced a nasty propaganda battle between the U.S. and China. The two sides have traded some of the sharpest charges made between two nations since the Soviet Union in 1985 falsely accused the CIA of manufacturing AIDS. U.S. intelligence officials don't think the pandemic was caused by deliberate wrongdoing. The outbreak that has now swept the world instead began with a simpler story, albeit one with tragic consequences. The prime suspect is natural transmission from bats to humans, perhaps through unsanitary markets. But scientists don't rule out that an accident at a research laboratory in Wuhan might have spread a deadly bat virus that had been collected for scientific study. Okay, now I'm old enough to remember when Tom Cotton was ripped for suggesting that there might be information, that maybe this is what happened. He said, I can't confirm this is what happened. I'm not saying I know this is what happened. I'm not saying the data support this is what happened. But there have been some pretty strong rumors coming out of China that this may have been something that happened. Right? Good science, bad safety is how Senator Tom Cotton put his theory in a February 16th tweet. He ranked such a breach or natural transmission as more likely than the two extreme possibilities, an accidental leak of an engineered bioweapon or a deliberate release. Cotton's earlier loose talk about bioweapons set off a furor back when it first raised it in late January and called the outbreak worse than Chernobyl. Trump and Pompeo added to the bio last month, describing the coronavirus as the Chinese virus and the Wuhan virus. Of course, that was not a problem. This was developed, not developed, but obviously allowed to disseminate by the Chinese government, lied about by the Chinese government, lied to the WHO. The Chinese government is solely responsible for this. If we're all going to be forced to wear face masks, by the way, like if we all have to wear face masks, I really want to put out one at Daily Wire that just says on the face mask, F communism, because this is the communist virus. China dished wild, irresponsible allegations of its own, says David Ignatius. On March 12th, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Li Jianzhao charged it might be the U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. He retweeted an article that claimed that the U.S. troops might have spread the virus when they attended the World Military Games in Wuhan in October of 2019. China retreated on March 22nd when ambassador to the U.S. Kui Tankai told Axios that such rumors were crazy on both sides. To be clear, U.S. intelligence officials think there's no evidence that the coronavirus was created in a laboratory as a potential bioweapon. Solid scientific research shows it wasn't engineered by humans and that it originated in bats, but it is unclear how the outbreak occurred in the first place. What's increasingly clear is that the initial origin story that the virus was spread by people who ate the bats at the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan is shaky. Scientists have now identified the culprit as a bat coronavirus through genetic sequencing. Bats were not sold at the seafood market, although that market could have sold animals that had contact with bats. The Lancet noted in a January study, the first COVID-19 case in Wuhan had no connection to the seafood market at all. There's a competing theory that scientists have been puzzling about for weeks, says David Ignatius. Less than 300 yards from the seafood market is the Wuhan branch of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Researchers from that facility and the nearby Wuhan Institute of Virology have posted articles about collecting bat coronaviruses from around China for study to prevent future illnesses. Did one of those samples leak, or was hazardous waste deposited in a place where it could spread? Richard Ebright, Rutgers microbiologist, said the first human infection could have occurred as a natural accident, but Ebright cautioned it could also have occurred as a lab accident with an accidental infection of a laboratory worker. So this doesn't mean they militarized the virus, but there was a Chinese study that was curiously withdrawn in ResearchGate. It was a brief article by Botao Zhao and Li Zhao from Guangzhou's South China University of Technology. I apologize for the mispronunciations. In addition to the origins of natural recombination and intermediate host, the killer coronavirus probably originated from a lab in Wuhan. Safety level may need to be reinforced in high-risk biohazardous laboratories. So then it is a complete government failure, right? Then it is not even the government didn't lock it down in Wuhan. The labs are run by the Chinese government in Wuhan. There are no private labs in China, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so that means that it's a communist country. That means this is purely and simply Chernobyl. Right? They didn't mean for it to happen, and it did happen. And people were punished, basically, publicly for talking about it. Pretty well done. Democracy dies in darkness. Tom Cotton's bad for even mentioning this possibility. And oh, by the way, it's also maybe the most likely possibility now, since the original suggestion that somebody just ate a bat at the Wuhan market now appears to be less plausible than the alternative explanation, which is that the bat that this came from was like 600 miles away from Wuhan. And the only way it gets there is presumably if somebody takes the virus and brings it to the laboratory there. Well done, everybody. Well done.